he foresaw problems with these kinds of agents.
Why didn't this get out in the press?
Well, I guess it did. I don't remember. We had no press release on it, obviously. You don't go out. This is a scientific affair within the scientific community. This is a scientific affair within the scientific community.
An historic victory over a dread disease is dramatically unfolded at the University of Michigan. Here, scientists usher in a new medical age with the monumental reports that prove the Salk vaccine against crippling polio to be a sensational success. It's a day of triumph for 40-year-old Dr. Jonas E. Salk, developer of the vaccine. He arrives with Basil O'Connor, head of the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which financed the tests. Hundreds of reporters and scientists from all over the nation gather for the momentous announcement.
It was too much of a show. There was too much Hollywood. There was too much exaggeration. And the impression in 1957 that was, in 1954, that was given was that the problem had been solved, that polio had been conquered.
But anyway, we knew it was in our seed stock for making the vaccine. That virus, you see, is 1 in 10,000 particles is not inactivated by formaldehyde. It was good science at the time because that was what you did. You didn't worry about these wild viruses.
So you discovered it wasn't being inactivated in the Salk vaccine?
Correct. So then, the next thing you know is 3-4 weeks after that, I found that there were tumors popping out in these hamsters.
Despite AIDS and leukemia suddenly becoming pandemic from wild viruses, Hillerman said this was good science at that time.
Hi, this is Mike Adams, the Health Ranger for NewsTarget.com. Now, what if everything you've been told about Gardasil and the HPV vaccines was a lie? What if it wasn't even true that HPV causes cervical cancer? What if the FDA knew years ago that HPV infections don't cause cancer, but they covered it up, refused to tell people about it? What if Gardasil was just pushed by pseudoscientific nonsense, complete junk science, and not only was useless in preventing cervical cancer, but was also potentially harmful to young women? What if all that were true? Well, I'm here to tell you today, I think it is true. In fact, I'm going to show you why that's true. I've just finished a special report called The Great HPV Vaccine Hoax Exposed. And you can find it on NewsTarget.com right now. It's a free report. Go check it out at NewsTarget.com. I'm going to go through some of the highlights right here and show you what's really going on with these HPV vaccines. It all starts with this company here, Hi-Fi DNA Tech. This company, they have a device that actually detects HPV infections. They tried to get this reclassified by the FDA into a Class 2 medical device, which would allow them to have it sold so they could sell it in the open market. To do that, they had to file a petition with the FDA. Now, that petition revealed some interesting documents showing that the FDA knew in 2003 that, in fact, HPV infections, that is the human papilloma virus infection, doesn't cause cervical cancer. And I'm going to use the FDA's own documents to show this to you. Here's a document called FDA Approves Expanded Use of HPV Test. You can find this on the FDA's own website. This was released in 2003. It's a press release. And it says, quote, most women who become infected with HPV are able to eradicate the virus and suffer no apparent long-term consequences to their health. And that means eradicate it on their own, without intervention, without a vaccine. It means that HPV infections are self-limiting. The same press release also says that although the rate of HPV infection in this group is high, most infections are short-lived and not associated with cervical cancer. You got that? Not associated with cervical cancer. It's right here on the press release. Now you can check out my special report on NewsTarget.com and you can see the links to this document yourself. You can go read it yourself. I've even saved copies of this in case the FDA deletes it, because they've been known to do that from time to time. Now, as the petition to the FDA states, and this is also found in the FDA archives, it is now generally agreed that identifying and typing HPV infection does not bear a direct relationship to stratification of the risk for cervical cancer. In other words, there's no link between HPV and cervical cancer. We've all been lied to. We've been told that this virus causes cancer, and that in order to protect young girls from cancer, we have to give them a vaccine. Well, it turns out that not only is that not true, but in fact, these vaccines may cause an increase in the risk of precancerous lesions in young girls. Yes, you heard me correctly, that the vaccine may actually harm certain women. Now here's a study that supports that. It's called the VRB-PAC background document. This is also on the FDA's website. I've got a link to it in my special report. And in this document, if you read carefully, you will find that the authors of this study are very concerned about the risk of harm to women who receive the vaccine. They even title it Concerns Regarding Primary Endpoint. And as it shows right here, what I've circled, observed efficacy is minus 44.6%. That means that the vaccine actually caused an increase in disease of 44.6%. Now that's in certain subgroups of women. It's not in all women, certain groups, but it means that the vaccine potentially poses a serious risk of harm to some women. And we've been told this vaccine is perfectly safe, right? We've been told no problem, anyone can get the vaccine. They've even tried to promote this vaccine for young boys. Didn't anyone tell them boys don't have a cervix? So, these people are crazy. They just try to promote these drugs for anything. It's classic fear-mongering and classic disease-mongering for the sole purpose of selling more expensive pharmaceuticals and vaccines to people who don't need them. Now here's another interesting study that showed up in the August 2007 issue of JAMA. That's the Journal of the American Medical Association. I've also got a link to this document in my special report. This document has some interesting results. It shows that the vaccine just doesn't work most of the time. In fact, it shows, if you look at the conclusion from the authors, they say, quote, and this is printed in JAMA, quote, no significant evidence of a vaccine therapeutic effect was observed in analyses restricted to women who received all doses of the vaccine. It also says that, quote, rates of viral clearance over a 12-month period are not influenced by vaccination. In other words, you can get the vaccine. It doesn't affect whether or not you still carry that virus over a period of 12 months. Has no effect at all on the women studied that we've talked about here in this published study. Doesn't mean it's with all women, but again, this is the subgroup that was studied. A final quote from these study authors, quote, given that viral clearance rates did not differ by treatment group and that persistent viral infection is the best established predictor of risk of progression, it is unlikely that vaccination could have a significant beneficial impact on rate of lesion progression. Now they're talking about precancerous lesions. And what that says, translated into plain English, is that basically the vaccine does not affect the rate of progression of precancerous lesions. Now all this runs counter to what we've been told by the FDA, doesn't it? In fact, Merck, the manufacturer of Gardasil, the vaccine being used here, probably would disagree with all this information. But I think that that's because their marketing of these HPV vaccines is based on just junk science. It's not based on solid science. It's based on fear campaigns. They know that if they can scare enough women into being afraid of cervical cancer, that they can market these vaccines and get a lot more people to buy into them. And they can make billions of dollars from doing that, especially if they can get the states to mandate these vaccines for young women. And they already have Texas doing it, and other states are talking about it. It's a big push, and it's not based on any science whatsoever. Now, I know that videos on YouTube have been attacked by scientists who say they don't have accurate information about vaccines. So that's why I brought these documents here. You can go to newstarget.com right now. You can check these out for yourself. You can read them for yourself, print them, study them, look at the numbers yourself, and you can see that the pro-vaccination lobby is full of bunk. It's nothing but hype, fear-mongering, disease-mongering, and really clever marketing designed to sell more vaccines to young girls who don't need them, who won't benefit from them, and who, in fact, might be harmed by them. Haven't we had enough of that nonsense? Isn't it time to stand up and really protect the health of our young children, our teens, our women in society? Isn't it time to stand up against this fear-mongering and disease-mongering by big pharma and pharmaceutical companies like Merck that have been involved in tax evasion and fraud and price fixing and all kinds of other problems and what I consider to be criminal behavior, and I've documented that on my website as well. I think it's time to stand up to these companies and say no to these mandatory vaccinations. Let's protect our children from these drug companies and say no to vaccinations. Thanks for listening. My name's Mike Adams, the Health Ranger for NewsTarget.com.
There are questions being asked about the vaccine known as Gardasil. About 8 million American girls have gotten the vaccine, which prevents cervical cancer. But is it safe? Here's Cheryl Atkinson.
The hope is that Gardasil will prove to be a lifesaver, preventing deadly cervical cancer. But today, Merck's HPV vaccine is dealing with a growing number of reports of serious side effects. Jamie Venice passed out and had a seizure after her Gardasil shot.
After my seizure, I remember I didn't want to go to bed because I thought that I wasn't going to be able to wake up.
She was lucky compared to Amanda Ratner. She came down with an illness so excruciating she had to take morphine. Her parents, both doctors, blame Gardasil.
She's gone from the position of being a competitive varsity lacrosse player in high school to somebody who's chronically ill.
Gardasil was approved in 2006 for girls as young as age 9. The conservative-funded public interest group Judicial Watch has obtained more than 8,000 adverse events reports under Freedom of Information law. The reports reveal everything from massive wart outbreaks to seizures and paralysis. Of 18 deaths, nearly a quarter cited blood clots. Jessica Vega got the shot at school when she was 13. Soon after, she was paralyzed. It took a year of braces and treatment to get her on her feet. Brittany Bell was 12. She collapsed with brain inflammation and paralysis. 14-year-old Jenny developed life-threatening paralysis that's resistant to treatment. Merck and the CDC say Gardasil is safe and effective, and that they've not found a link to any deaths. They also say illnesses reported after vaccinations may not have been caused by the shot, and that Gardasil appears safer than most vaccines, with half the average reported serious adverse events. The CDC says it will continue to evaluate the data, while some families are evaluating whether their loved ones should have the vaccine at all. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.